I am talking, as I do every week, to our state senator, Bruce Tarr. Hi, Senator. How are you?
Hi, Heather. I'm doing fine. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's
Good.
Monday. We don't usually talk on Mondays, the beginning of the week. Everyone's concerned about vaccinations. So tell us let's start with that.
Well, they sure are. In fact, we've been getting a lot of calls in our office, and I know my colleagues are as well, because it's such a sensitive and complicated subject. And, we now at long last have the ability to go on the offensive with regard to the pandemic. And so we all want to participate and get the vaccine. Unfortunately, we don't have enough volume yet to be able to reach everybody. So it's going in phases, I think everyone knows, and I'm sure you've seen as well, reported in the media. But those phases have gone in different ways. So phase one was fairly smooth. Phase two has been a little bit more difficult because it involves a different population. And the population that we've been most concerned about are those who are over age 75, who don't necessarily have the same kind of familiarity with computers and with computer skills as we do. And so that's been a problem. And so we've been working with the administration, and we had a call this week with every member of the Senate, with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Mary Lou Sutters, who is running the COVID Command Center, to talk about how we can make the situation better. And the first thing is, Heather, we definitely need more vaccines. We've been getting about 86,000 a week. And the hope is that this week, we're going to start to get over 100,000, so maybe 101,000. But we could distribute, at least right now it's thought, over 300,000 a week if we could get them. And so definitely problem number one is getting enough supply. And it certainly seems like the Biden administration is prioritizing manufacturing more vaccine, and we are asking them to do that. But then the second issue is the front end. How do we make sure that people can get appointments, that can get a vaccine, that are eligible in their respective phase? And that's what we're struggling with right now. And what a lot of us have been talking about is trying to get more of a centralized system where there might be an 800 number that you can call, or certainly a place where you can call to get help, to have someone help you navigate the system so that you can get an appointment. And we're making progress on that. I think we'll probably see something very soon.
So a couple of things there. First of all, we have a new site opening up, vaccination site opening up on the North Shore, at least one, right? And that is
Yes,
at the Doubletree Inn. Do you want to talk about
yes,
that?
in Danvers, yes.
So, and I think, so what is confusing for people is, let's say I'm over 75. I'm not actually. I've heard that this site is available, so I should be eligible. How do I get myself to that site? Can I just show up? Do I need an appointment? Who do I call? Do we know how that works?
You do need an appointment. The primary way to do it has been to go to the state's website, mass.gov. But once you're there, it's been fairly confusing for folks. There's a map, and you have to select on that map the site that you're interested in. The fact that the site is there doesn't mean that it has availability of appointments. And so folks are trying to go to the site, they put in a lot of information, and then they find out that that site doesn't have an appointment for them. So that's been a huge issue in trying to, again, centralize it so you can look where there might be an appointment on the site instead of having to go one at a time and go by trial and error. A second issue has been the insurance card situation, where in many cases the site will ask you to upload a photo of your insurance card. And that's a technological challenge that some folks have been having a lot of trouble with. Again, we've been helping a lot of people in our office. We've been helping them to navigate the system, but we're trying to move toward, at least for some people, having a phone number available that can help them go through this and make it easier. The other thing is the availability of the appointments. And the appointments are really driven by the amount of vaccine that we have. And so we're trying to get more vaccine from the federal government. Obviously, there's another vaccine that's on the verge of an EUA, an emergency use approval. Hopefully that will help. But again, the technology part of it has been a big challenge.
So I did read today that primary care physicians, health centers, and small pharmacies are asking, why aren't we getting tapped to help out here? Do you have any answers for that?
So we've been asking those questions as well. And one of the things that I've said throughout the pandemic is there is no manual, there is no playbook to know how to do this. It's developing as we go. And I, for one, have been arguing that at least independent pharmacists could be doing more. Certainly primary care physicians could be doing more. They're capable. So we've been asking those questions, hopefully to get them more fully utilized. On Cape Ann, we have had a local pharmacist, and Senior Care, for instance, conducted a clinic this past Saturday where they were able to vaccinate, I think, about 180 people. So we're starting to see communities host clinics for smaller groups rather than go to the larger vaccination sites like the Doubletree in Danvers. So as we continue to work through this, we need to develop a system that makes more use of the capacity that we have to vaccinate. But a closely related problem to that is making sure that the doses get to people who are actually in a position to use them. Because one of the issues that we've heard is some folks have overbooked the amount of vaccine that they order, and then that vaccine doesn't wind up going into arms right away, which is one of the reasons we've been concerned about the CDC report that indicated that only around half of the vaccine that we've received has actually gone into people's arms. And one of the reasons for that is sort of overbooking, if you will. And so the administration is now taking steps to make sure that can't happen. They're going to track more closely who gets the vaccine, what got used, and redistribute what's still available. Because we've all read the stories about vaccine being wasted in the newspaper, and that's absolutely unacceptable.
So tell us what someone should do today if they're concerned about, if they're over 75 and they want to get vaccinated. They should go to mass.gov.
They go to mass.gov and they navigate there. They find one of the vaccination sites they'd like to go to. They put in their information. And if they're having a problem with that, they should reach out to our office, Representative Ferrante's office. We're here to help. But the first point of contact is mass.gov.
Great. So let's move on to the governor's budget. What's going on there?
So the governor began the budget process by filing his House 1 budget recommendation last week. He's statutorily required to do it in January. He did do that. And the budget is an interesting one in that it's being termed as a recovery budget, one that's intended to help us rebuild as we get through the pandemic. Now, one of the important features of it is that the joint revenue estimate has been accepted. And that means the House, the Senate, and the administration have all agreed that we're going to see about a 3.5% increase in state revenue beyond what we got this year in the current fiscal year that we're in right now. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility. It's also good news, but folks also have to put into perspective, that's a 3.5% increase on a budget that was significantly reduced. And so we had about a $3.5 billion reduction or problem that we had to solve, a gap in the current fiscal year's budget. And so the 3.5% increase is over a lower number. And this budget will probably wind up being about $500 million less than the current year's budget, unless we see additional assistance from the federal government. And we're now feeling much more positive about the odds of getting some more assistance. So things might change, but right now, the governor's proposal is less, but the governor's proposal importantly funds the first year of the Student Opportunity Act, which we had to put off for this year's budget. But next year we would be, if his budget were to pass, we'd be doing the first year of the Student Opportunity Act, and it increases local aid to cities and towns by 3.5%, which is a commitment that the Baker-Polito administration has had to raise local aid by the amount that revenue goes up by the same percentage. And this budget does that. So there are some shining bright lights here, but also some flags of caution. To balance the budget, there's also required about a $1.6 billion withdrawal from the stabilization fund. Now that still leaves us with money in the fund, but we've had 2 large withdrawals from it. We've needed to make them, but it's something to be concerned about.
Well, let's move on to the weather, because that's something everybody enjoys talking about. We have a storm coming, and you're telling me that there's some activity on Plum Island as we speak.
There is, this nor'easter that's coming our way, and as we're speaking right now, I don't know if they might be able to, our viewers see some snowflakes in your windows behind you, Heather, but it's getting close.
I think a little bit, yeah.
And our concern is for coastal erosion, which is obviously an ongoing concern. There's been some very serious erosion on the northern part of Plum Island in a neighborhood known as Reservation Terrace, which is the roadway that runs through it. And it's a prime example of why we need to plan and be proactive rather than reactive. And so we've been working on solutions. Some of them are very, very promising. It appears that we are now poised to have another dredging of the Merrimack River that will yield about 220,000 cubic yards of sand that will be able to infill the area that's been eroded. And that's a very important concept, is to never again let dredge material that could be reused to nourish a beach or a dune system be dumped into a disposal site offshore. So it looks like we're going to be able to accomplish that, but we have a problem right now on Plum Island. And so Mass DOT and DCR are out there deploying some very large sandbags. And to call them sandbags really doesn't do them justice. Technically, they're known as super sacks. And they weigh about a ton each. They're very, very large. They're lifted into place with a crane, but they're filled with sand. And that's happening as we speak.
So this is an emergency effort right now, these super-sized bags that weigh a ton. Yeah.
Super sacks are an emergency measure to try to abate the situation. They'll have some sand placed behind them to create a barrier. And the advantage of a super sack is it's not a hard structure. And hard structures in Massachusetts are generally not permittable, even though they may have some ability to resist wave energy directly a little bit better. But they also have other consequences, because when you put a hard structure up, what's on either end of it sometimes suffers from reflected wave energy that's been diverted to the ends. So there's a lot of calculation that has to happen here. And that's why I'm saying we need to get out ahead of things. We need to realize that we're going to continue to see challenges like this. And we need to make decisions to engineer where we can, to use natural defenses, certainly when we can, and help our marshes be vitalized and revitalized. And then there may be some decisions where building is not going to be possible in the future because of the consequences of putting a structure near a particularly migrating dune system. So we have a lot to think about.
Well, talking about all this, what comes to mind much more locally is Long Beach and Rockport. And I realize that's a federal program. There's federal money, state money. They need to rebuild the seawall. Do you want to just comment on what's happening there?
Absolutely. And I you know what, I think what's happening at Long Beach is a prime example of what I'm talking about folks trying to see what the future might hold and to try to get out ahead of it by designing a project that will be resilient and cost effective and has the benefit of engineering. Now, the difficulty at Long Beach is the enormous cost of rebuilding that seawall, which would otherwise be borne by a relatively small number of people, i.e. the inhabitants of the town of Rockport.
Right.
And so one of the good things about that project is FEMA participation. And one of the more enlightened things that I believe FEMA does is not wait necessarily for a disaster to continue to reoccur. They have programs known as hazard mitigation, where you try to identify the threat and do something about it before it becomes a crisis.
All right. Well, we will talk to you next week and we'll review the storm, how it all went. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Heather. You too.